Hi, this is Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy, and welcome to another edition of The Journeyman. So tonight's episode is in regards to an email I got late last week from a young student at The Ohio State University. His name is Cal. He said, Phil, good morning. I hope you're doing well. My name is Cal Naguski. I'm a third-year student at Ohio State. I came across your website looking for tool and die shops in the Cleveland area. Cleveland's about 90 miles from Erie. Like you, family is very important to me. My great-great-grandfather started a family company in the metal manufacturing industry over 100 years ago in 1913. This company is now in its fourth generation. This summer, I am trying to learn a little bit more about the company and the industry itself. I feel like I could learn a great deal from speaking to you. If you don't mind, I would love to talk to you and hear more about the tool and die shop experience and in the industry, and ask some questions about wire EDM. As a young college student, I would greatly appreciate a few minutes of your time to talk over the phone early next week. Please let me know if this works or does it interest you. Additionally, please let me know if you want any more information or have any questions. Thank you and have a great weekend. Well-written letter. Beautiful. And he took the time to put the Ohio State University logo at the bottom. It only takes a minute to look like a pro. Good job, Cal. Well, I did talk to Cal, and in this edition of The Journeyman, this is a young guy, and I had no idea where he was going with this, but I'll always talk to young people about the trade. And I could tell during the interview, which we did a Zoom conference, he was looking down, he was taking notes, and he had questions to ask. He did a very nice job. He has some great questions. So, I hope you enjoy this. You know, I'm always open to taking these type of calls and interacting with young people who have an interest in the trade we all love. So enjoy this edition of The Journeyman. Cal,
Hey Phil, how you doing?
how are you?
Good. Sorry I'm a minute late,
Nope.
but worked out okay.
You warned me. You gave me an update. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly.
All right. And you're nice.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So I got your email.
Yeah.
Kind of just wanted to chat about the trade. You said you had some family history here.
Exactly.
Are you actually a student at Ohio State right now?
I am. I just finished my second year, so I'm halfway done.
Okay.
Um,
Now, what's your subject of
I'm
study?
studying finance.
Finance?
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you, I got to assume you go to a couple games at the Shoe, don't you?
I do. My freshman year, I went to every single home
Wow.
game. My sophomore year, I just went to the Big Ten ones.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I've never been to the Horseshoe, but it looks really beautiful.
yeah.
Have you made it to Beaver Stadium for a whiteout yet?
No, that I haven't done.
It's
an experience. Like I hadn't been to a college football game since I was a little kid at out in East Lansing, watch Michigan State play Ohio State when I was younger. And I remember my first home game as a freshman. It was unbelievable. And I was just taken aback at, how crazy and how it's crazier than an NFL game, I feel like.
Oh, way more. I will say that for anybody who's listening has never been to a Big Ten college game, they're amazing. Mm-hmm. Every one of those schools is beautiful, Yeah. And, I remember my first Penn State game many years ago, and I was like, there's so much to watch. You don't even have to watch the football game between the bands and everything. It's a blast. So, fire away. What did you want to chat about?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of background, honestly, before we get started. So, like I said, I'm halfway done with my undergrad time at Ohio State. My dad right now is the president of a family company called Federal Metal in Cleveland. It was started in 1913 by my great-great-grandfather. And it's metal manufacturing, basically. So we buy scrap, obviously, and then make sort of copper-based alloys and sell them as ingots.
Okay.
So I had an internship this summer in Columbus that had gotten canceled.
Right.
Figured, there's not a better time than now to sort of learn the family business. So right now I'm sort of spending the summer learning a little bit about the metal and some of the scrap they buy. So wire EDM is something they're throwing in 10 to 15,000 pounds, and a lot of these heats that they're doing, and they're doing 10 heats, so they're going through 100,000 pounds of wire EDM a week. Um, but so right now I'm trying to learn a little bit about wire EDM, but also just the manufacturing industry as well.
All right. So I may have missed something here. What exactly are they? What exactly are they doing with the wire EDM?
Yeah, so wire EDM is 66% copper and 34% zinc. So what they do is they'll buy scrap wire EDM,
The,
and then
the wires from the EDM machine.
exactly
Okay. All right.
that are used.
All right. Okay.
Um,
I did
and
not know
then
I did not know there was a market for that.
yeah, so there's probably let's say you have wire EDM, you probably sell it to a scrap dealer, just to get some money for it, and then Federal Metal, what they will do, buy that wire EDM from the scrap dealer.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
So I was a little confused. I thought you were actually talking about the wire EDM machine, not just the wire.
oh
Okay.
no, sorry.
No, that's not a problem. So do you have questions about the wire EDM process, or what do you want to know?
Well, I want to first, I want to know a lot about more tool and die shops in general, because a lot of tool and die shops use this wire EDM.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I have no experience with tool and die shops. I actually did some reading, and I saw that, the the tool and die shop industry is really trending down right now, and you don't see it lasting much longer. But are you, you used to own a tool and die shop? Were you contracted to do most of your work, or were you doing work and then selling it? What is that process like?
The way it worked when I had my shop,
Yeah.
all right, basically somebody would come to me with a drawing of a plastic part that they needed a mold built for. So let's just say it's a 2-cavity mold for some sort of a plastic toy. All right. So the customer would usually specify how many cavities they want. Now, I was in the mold making industry, plastic injection molds. All right. So a client would come in and say, listen, I need a quote for a 2-cavity of this, or a 4-cavity. And all that means is when the mold opens and shuts, 2 parts will come out, 4 parts will come out, or even a single cavity, 1 part will come out. If you get into, imagine one time I built this giant swing seat to hold a toddler, Little Tikes toys. And that was a big, giant mold. All right. I have pictures of it here somewhere. That was a single cavity. You couldn't it would have been tough to put 2 of those into one mold. Okay. And then, then you've got molds that for tiny little parts that might be 64, or they're usually an even number, 128 cavities. All right. So the way that works is then you bid on it. You have to calculate how much steel you're going to buy, how much engineering time you need to design it, and how much machining time. So you add all that up. You multiply your hours by your shop rate, which your accountant has helped you figure out with your overhead and your actual labor rate, and then you put in your bid. And then there may be a little haggling in and out of that. Now, the way it used to work, again, I say this because I haven't had a shop in a while. The customer then, with this purchase order, would give me a 30% down payment. Okay. 1/3 down. And that would get me going with my labor and purchasing my materials once the design was approved. When the mold was finished, depending on the customer, but usually it was customary to get your final 2/3. All right. Now, what happened a lot towards the end, because a lot of people were really struggling, a lot of the customers were having a problem paying the final 2/3. So it became a real cash flow problem, because you've already built this mold. Let's say you put 500 hours into it. Your shop rate is internally, you're charging 45, but you're hoping to be somewhere around 30. So you're making a 30% profit is the goal. So you 500 times 30, what do we got? 5 times 3, 15 grand, 3,000 in material, 18,000, and a couple thousand for the design. So you get 20,000 into it. You charge them 29 for it. So they only gave you, let's say they make round numbers. I charged them 30 for it. They gave me 10 down. I need that extra. I need that 20
Right.
now. Okay.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the lifeblood of a busy shop is you're always using that next third from a guy or the 2/3 as they keep rolling in. That's your cash flow.
Okay. So you think that that was probably your biggest challenge while you were owning the shop
No, it
was
wasn't at all. I was very blessed to have really great customers. My first customer, and one of my largest customers, was Little Tykes Toys Company, as I mentioned, and uh, they were owned by Rubbermaid.
okay.
And Rubbermaid ended up getting bought out by a company named Newell, Newell, Newell Office Products of all things. And basically, Newell Office Products that was big enough to buy Rubbermaid was basically 4 accountants in an office in Chicago. Right? They were like asset managers.
Yeah.
And when I would get my checks, instead of coming from Little Tykes, used to say from Newell Rubbermaid. That was the name of the new company. Okay. So, but they were really good about making sure I got paid on time. And quite frankly, up until the end, they always paid on time. The problem was in 2003 and 4, it became very easy to get your work done on the Pacific Rim. All right.
Okay.
So back in the 50s, the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, when you look at a three-dimensional mold of any type, a part, the way we built that stuff was, learning to be a mold maker or tool maker was a 4-year apprenticeship and probably 3 or 4 years after that of dedication to get
Okay.
reasonably good at what you were doing. Well, once the CNC machines came in, they first came in, all they could do is go point to point, drill holes. But boy, they could drill holes fast. So that got rid of the drill presses pretty quickly in the tool and die shops because the drill press, you move by hand and you drill the hole, then you go over and pick up another spot and drill that hole. With a CNC machine going 100 inches a minute, or even back then.
Yeah.
This was back in the 80s. We had a tape machine. And have you ever seen a player piano?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Tape machines ran off a tape with holes in it.
Okay.
Okay, and that's how they were programmed.
Mhm.
Well, then in the 90s, we started getting the solid state controls, and all of a sudden you could mill circles. Then the 3D programming came out for us. Probably 96, 97 in there. We started getting 3D electronic models, and once it became apparent that you didn't have to train people for years to be mold makers and do this 3D work,
Mhm.
that now the machine could do it and do it very accurately. All right.
Mhm.
So and then that slowly got perfected. You spent a lot more money, of course. You had computer systems and software systems and things like that, and a programmer, but you could literally go home at night and let a machine run overnight and come back the next
Right.
morning and have a beautiful finished cavity or core for your mold. Well, guess what? Didn't take the Pacific Rim long to figure that out.
Mhm.
So to this day, they're still pretty cheap over there. They used to really joke about their quality. It depends what shop you use in China or Vietnam or whatever. They've got some good shops now. I mean, it's taken them 15, 20 years, but they've got it figured out. And
Mhm.
that was my challenge. I mean, I couldn't compete. That was it for me. All right. How do you tell your average guy? Now, this is 2003. I think my top rate guys were around $18 an hour.
Mhm.
How do I tell them they have to work for $6 an hour? You can't.
Right.
You can't do that. All right. So it was a big upset in the trade, and I would tell you in Erie, Pennsylvania, we had a lot of tool and die shops. As you know, you've talked to you found me because of my family's business and me having a business. It was a great business. It was a lot of
Mhm.
fun, and it was really a lot of fun. But I would tell you that any tool shop that's even still going, for the most part, in Erie, Pennsylvania, is a shadow of what it used to be.
Okay.
And they do a lot more machining work now versus mold work. A lot of times, the ones that survived, a lot of them built a relationship with a shop in China. So they would quote. I'm just throwing out round numbers again. They would quote their customer 30, get it built in China for 7, bring it back here, tune it up a little bit, and still make a profit. All right.
But you'd outsource that.
So they would outsource it. Yeah. And so they still own Joe Smith's Tool and Die with 2 tool makers instead of 50 that just tune up the Chinese molds when they come in. Just make sure they're ready to go.
Okay.
And I'm picking on China here. You can name the country over there. I think I heard that China's now offshoring their molds to Vietnam. That's what I heard.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Actually, with the EDM wire, it's kind of interesting just that the two relate. Um, there's something called honey, which is metal from China, and the wire EDM and honey sort of compete with prices because you can sell the wire EDM as yellow brass to as honey. So the you you're always competing with China prices basically for the wire. You never get better prices than that.
Right.
Um, but and then tool and die shops today. That's you just talked about outsourcing a little bit. Where is their money coming? Are they having a steady inflow of customers and things like that, or is it some years are better than others?
Well, it's funny because of the work I do online. I
Yeah.
see a lot of guys when I post something like this video talking about the tool and die and the mold making trades. They say they're really busy, and and that's good. But go through if you ever go to my website, you'll see a thing called the Journeyman / Working Hands Radio. Look for an interview, which would be really good for you, from a guy named Mark Perseo, I believe his name was.
Okay.
He had a very, very successful tool shop for many, many years. He did all automotive work. All right. Now, you would think, being tied into the automotive industry, that's a pretty good deal, right? Well, I started reading things back in the 90s that look out if you're doing work for automotive. Because, let's face it, back then, you had the big three, right? GM, Chrysler, and Ford. And their stockholders are demanding more return on their money. And, the money guys know how to do this stuff. Well, they started leveraging their tooling costs. Now, you got to understand, the molds I would build. Now, I built some expensive molds too. But, these molds for these cars, the internal parts on cars, they're not cheap molds. Okay. Especially for like your radiator parts and things like that. Believe it or not, those are some fiberglass resins. So they won't melt from the heat of the water. And those are very expensive molds. One company in town named Carlisle, they built, one of the things they built were they called them radiator end tank molds. It was a thing that goes on top of your radiator. Heavy plastic, but it's like a fiberglass resin. Well, when they come out, the GM expected these things to be perfectly flat. Well, or they would leak. Well, we all know, I would think they put some gasket sealing around them or something, but they wanted them perfectly flat. Well, when they come out red hot out of a press after a very long cycle time, as they would cure, they twist. All right. Mm-hmm. They tried to put them in water. They did. You know what they actually did? They actually would figure out and take a guess at it and get pretty close. They would actually engineer a twist into the mold and machine it that way. Mm-hmm. Try to guess how the part was going to twist afterwards. And when the part came out twisted, as it cooled, it would straighten back out.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. They got paid a lot of money for that. But in the end, their best customer shut them down. I actually work in the old Carlisle building, about 100,000 square foot building. That had 100 tool makers in it. That's all gone. All right. Now it's a machine shop. All right. So, this guy's interview, if you read Mark, they actually came to him because remember at the beginning of the story, I told you about the first thirds and second thirds.
Yeah, exactly.
He had to finance the whole thing for 2 years.
Wow.
All right. So you're underwriting $150,000 mold out of your own pocket. And then GM would spit that money out. And in the end, he had to fight with them for that. So I think he was in business, 33 years, and just one day said, I can't do it anymore. And he had a mold shop. He was running parts. He had a tool and die shop. It's not a business for the faint of heart. I can tell you that.
Okay.
Very, very cash intense.
Right. Yeah. And then, so what sort of inspired you to, create these videos and subscription service on your website and sort of share your knowledge to others?
One day back in 2010, I believe it was, I took a part into our inspection department at work, and it had an angle on it. All right. And they have to inspect it and they sign off on it. And they told me my angle was wrong. Well, I asked them how they had checked it, and they told me, and I didn't think that was the right way to check it. And I had asked them if they had used a sign bar. And a sine bar, you probably don't know what a sine bar is because you're not in the trade, but a sine bar is the most accurate way to check an angle. They said, what's a sine bar? So that made me realize right away that there was some basic knowledge needs out there for people. And number two, I began to think in 2010, I'd closed my business in around 2003. So 5, 6, 7 years after I closed, we lost them. We lost them.
Here I am. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. I figured you'd figure out how to get back on.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me recap where I was at talking about. I was holding that thought and I lost it. Darn it! Do you remember where I was at? You're frozen again.
Yeah. So Mark was financing. Mark was financing over 2 years.
Right. No. I was talking about why you asked me why I started the Tool and Die Guy site.
Yeah.
I was worried my knowledge that I had spent 30 years accumulating was not going to get passed down. That was the main reason. Because at that time, mold making was so intense and you had to learn how to run so many different machines because there weren't 3D CNC machines. It was so much fun to be a mold maker and tool maker. And I had learned so much, and I knew I didn't learn the wrong trade because they still build molds. They just don't build them here anymore. So it wasn't like I was the last buggy whip maker left in town, right? But unfortunately, again, and this is not sour grapes. So the guys that listen to me sometimes, this just comes up a lot. People want my opinion on it. And again, I'm not an anti-Chinese person. My whole thing is I just don't think they're the best country in the world to be in business with. That's just my opinion. But I keep people. I've been hearing for 10 years. Oh, it's coming back. I don't see it. I don't know. And again, there's one shop in town that's doing extremely well, and I don't know what they've done well for a long time, and they built some really expensive molds, and they must have a really exotic customer that'll pay them for these things.
Right.
But for the most part, I don't see it coming back like it ever used to be. I mean, look at young guys like yourself. Very few people are getting into it, looking for apprentices. I used to get a phone call a week from a kid looking for an apprenticeship when I had my shop. Then it went down to a phone call a month, then a phone call a year.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
And it's interesting too, because you read online and it says the average age is like in the tool and die industry, right, is like 45 or 50 now.
Oh, yeah. We're getting real close to retirement age. And again, knowing that, I'm so glad I did this. I managed to record about 350 training videos, and that library will be my legacy. It was very important to me to leave some sort of a legacy of my experience in the trade and my family's legacy in the trade. 100 years. I always tell people that. It's kind of funny. It's easy to say that, my family's been doing this for 100 years. I actually joined Ancestry last year.
Okay.
And I found the 1920 census 100 years ago, and my grandfather was listed as a tool maker in 1920. Wow. So it's been 100 years. So
that's crazy.
It is crazy.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. So I'm gonna just ask, a couple questions about the wire EDM. I don't know how much experience you have, but when you did have the shop, did you use a lot of the wire EDM machines and the wire itself?
I never had enough wire EDM work to justify purchasing the machine. So okay. I had an outsourced guy here in Erie. That's all he did was wire EDM work for people. Yeah. And so that's what the type of molds I did not require a lot of EDM or wire EDM work. Okay. Occasionally when I needed it, I would just have it done. Pay to have it done.
And do you think that's the standard in the tool and die industry, or do you think you were an exception to that?
Good question. I would say, in my experience, it was kind of the standard. Unless you built that type of mold where you could use wire EDM every day, then I know shops in town that build, incredible intricate molds for Gillette razor blades and things like that. And I've never been through their shops, but I would assume they probably get 4 wire EDMs running 24 hours a day. All right, because they pay for it. The work will pay for itself. If you've got that much wire EDM work, then it's a no-brainer. So, there's different types of molds you build in different types of dies. I would think that'd be probably a pretty popular item to have in a die shop. And I explain on one of my videos on YouTube the difference between a mold and a die. But basically, a mold, shuts something molten is put into it, usually some sort of plastic or resin. It cools, it opens, and the part pops out. You got a part. A die, in my opinion, is usually a set of a die that two halves of a die that goes up and down and stamps out parts. Just think of a cookie cutter. That's a very simple explanation, but that's kind of the difference between a die and a mold. Okay, so you don't, with the dies, as far as I know, you don't have all the stuff we did on molds had so much, it had draft angles on it, so the parts would release. With die cutting, I think there's a lot of straight walls and very precise, and wire EDM is extremely precise, really precise.
Yeah, that's what sort of sets it apart, is how precise it is from the research and videos I've been watching.
Yes, yeah, they do amazing work. And the nice thing about wire EDMs versus conventional EDMs, conventional EDMs run off they need a medium to connect between the electrode and the part you're trying to erode. You have to have this oil to separate the two to form an insulator, so it can act as a conductor. So the oil has a propensity to catch on fire. Almost every tool and die shop, I'll bet, that's burned down in this country, burned down because somebody left a regular EDM machine running unattended at night. All right, a wire EDM doesn't catch on fire because you're basically running a form of distilled water, I believe, through it.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting, though.
But yeah, you can let those run all night. The worst thing I've ever heard that happens with one of those is the wire can break.
Yeah, and now there's so many of those EDM job shops that exactly, like, people aren't going to tool and die shops much anymore for their wire EDM needs, because they're shops specializing in just EDM,
Right. So, if that's your niche, and those guys, I don't know if it is anymore, but it used to be, quite a specialty. Not a lot of guys could run a wire EDM machine. So that's why a couple guys in town just made a living off. They buy 2 wire EDMs, just run wire EDMs 24 hours a day for everybody else.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's good on the wire EDM side. A lot of this was trying to understand, I'd never really heard much about tool and die shops in general. So hearing about how you guys operate, or how tool and die shops in general operate, is very helpful.
Good.
Just to familiarize myself. So I appreciate that. Let's see. And then what you record these videos and talk, sort of share about, young people interested in the manufacturing industry. What's that been like? How often do you get people to talk to you? Am I young?
You're young. I don't get a lot of guys your age to reach out to me. Okay. But there are some. I gave away, with the help of some people about a month ago, I gave away, I think, 7 memberships to my site. So people jumped on, and I sponsored 7 kids from around the world. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
That was very cool. If you look at my site, I believe there's a tab that says the scholarship fund, and I've got all the pictures of the guys that got it. It was a lot of fun to interact with them and see it was a pretty global contingent there. That was cool. But the apprenticeship program in Pennsylvania used to be really outstanding, and I did a 4-year apprenticeship, 8,000 hours, and it's kind of changed now. It's kind of merit based. They just always have to mess with things. I mean, it's just not the same. When I went through it, it was the 8,000 hours, 2,000 hours a year, plus your night school, all that good stuff. And now I think you can test out of some stuff, which isn't the worst thing. I could have probably tested out of a few things, but it's not the same. I don't know. I can't even tell you, because I'm supposed to be involved in our apprenticeship program at work, and it's like this vague number to finish. Like one guy got 2 years into it, and he hasn't completed it yet because I don't know if they quit offering the courses yet. That would have never happened during my time. We would have taught the courses at the shop. My apprenticeship was going to be done in 4 years. That was a beautiful thing. I knew exactly how much I was going to make every 6 months. I still have all that information, my apprenticeship rates, and
that was a contract I had with the company. The biggest thing guys have a problem with now is that they're afraid people are going to leave after you train them.
Okay.
So I train you for 4 years and make you a good tool maker, and you're like, and I'm going to go work for my uncle Joe because he was too cheap to give me an apprenticeship, but thanks for training. And unfortunately, I know some places have tried to sign a contract that say you've got to stay so many years after your apprenticeship. I never did that. That wasn't the standard back in, at least when I did it. I stayed about a year after my apprenticeship. I loved my apprenticeship, but they kept putting me on second shift at where I was working after I graduated, and I couldn't stand it. So, yeah, the apprenticeship programs today are just there's just I don't know, they're just not as good as they used to be, because you're getting a 4-year degree, correct?
I am, yeah.
And you've got X amount of work and credits to get done in 4 years.
Exactly.
That's the carrot for you.
Exactly.
All right, that's what you still need in the apprenticeships. The kid needs to know. I look at my apprenticeship. My wife's got on the wall her master's degree from Pepperdine University.
Okay.
And right under that, or actually right next to it, is my my certified apprenticeship papers from the state of Pennsylvania, from the Department of Labor and Industry. Big gold seal on it. It's awesome. I'm very proud of that.
Right.
That was my college experience. Interestingly enough, back in the 70s, and if you lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, and you had any talent for tool making, you'd be out of your mind to go to college. There was no reason to. I mean, I made so much money in the 1980s, it was crazy. Now I worked a lot of hours, but I was young. I could do that, right? So no, it was a really fun trade, very lucrative trade. But now college is kind of the way everybody's going. And there you are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's how society is right now, it seems like.
Yep.
And it also seems with the tool and die shops, there's a general theme that a lot of these tool and die shops are family run. Is that correct to you? You feel?
Yeah. Usually it's some guy like me starts a shop, right? And then depending on how it goes, my kids come in and they might run it, they might take it over. Now, that one shop I mentioned in Erie that's doing very well, the father started it back in the 60s. He's since passed away, and the kids have really built it into a powerhouse. Okay. Yeah, then there's another shop that I mentioned, like the razor blades and that's a world-class company. They got plants in Brazil and everything. Okay. And one son runs one division, the dad's like 87 now, still the first one at work, still the last one to leave.
Yeah.
All right. Got more money than the Pope. All right. But he's at work every day because he loves it. And he started his shop, I believe, in 1956. So
Wow.
Yeah, now they're a global leader in what they do. So that's a good observation. Occasionally you'll see a tool shop that is owned by a conglomerate or a big company because they decided that it might be cheaper for them to keep the work in and just build. If I'm GM and I'm building so many molds and paying somebody a 30% profit to build them, maybe I need to look at building some myself.
Okay.
All right. So that can happen too.
All right. That sounds good. That's all I've got for you.
That's it. That's all.
I don't know what you were expecting, but
I was, for the people who are going to listen to this, you just sent me a nice email saying you'd like to chat about trade. So, I've been around it long enough. I mean, there's the guys on eBay or not eBay on YouTube and that, when I post something on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, there's so much knowledge out there. Somehow I've become a little bit of this spokesman or advocate for the trade, I would say. And I'm very comfortable talking about generalities. And I know what I know, but you'll never know everything in this trade. And but I know enough about everything to at least point you in the right direction about it if I didn't know. You know what I'm saying? I've been exposed to a lot. But there's guys out who just specialize in wired EM. Well, that's not me. If you ever bought one and you needed help, I'm not your guy. But I could probably find you a guy to help. You get it?
Right. And but we've already, from my talk with you, there are some things I've concluded. It's that the tool and die shop industry is, probably not going to make a comeback because you're competing with outsourced projects with other countries. A lot of people do outsource their wire EDM anyways that are in the tool and die industry. The wire EDM is special because it does not catch on fire like the the sinker EDM and things
Right.
like that. And you know, you explained sort of how the tool and die shops work, and I've never talked to anyone that's ever worked in a tool and die shop.
Okay. Yeah. You know, when you're a tool maker, a lead mold maker in a shop, you know, I have something handy here. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
This is how a job would normally start. They hand me this packet of 30 drawings.
Yeah.
All right. Now that might freak a lot of machinists out, but I know how to go through these drawings and figure out who's going to do what. I'm not going to do all these myself. So you almost become a little bit of a project manager.
Yeah.
Right? Then I would oversee the apprentices that were working under me. It was a really fun job. A 10-hour day in a tool room went like that.
Right.
Because you're busy doing math, you're busy running EDM machines, helping apprentices. It was a lot of fun. So it was not a big deal to work a lot of overtime. But I just want to be careful about one thing. I can't predict if I don't want to be the negative guy. I can't predict if the tool making industry is going to come back or not.
Right.
There's always hope. There's always hope because you don't need as many guys like me anymore. The machines can do so much of the work. It's still nice to have a couple guys with experience in mold making to put them together, check them when they're done, because there's always a little final fit up to do. All right. There's always a little handwork here and there, but that's going away too. But I was hoping maybe something with this pandemic would, because all of a sudden Americans were like, oh my gosh, we get all our pills built over in China, made in China, right? Oh, they're gassed. Well, good luck. We get everything built over there.
Yeah.
Now that the pills kind of brought that to light, but there's a lot built over there. So I don't know. There's always hope. I would never want to be negative and say it's never coming back. I'm a little doubtful that it's ever going to be what it was, but I hope it does make a comeback someday. It's a great business, but I don't know. You know, it's very tempting for a purchasing order at a company, a purchasing manager at a company, and they come to Phil and say, "Hey, how much for a water bottle mold?" And I'll throw out that number again. You know, $30,000. Phil, I can get this built in China, and they'll sample the mold and give me sample parts for $8,000. The only issue we have, the only saving grace to building molds in the United States, is we can do them fast. You still got to wait for it to ship from China. That's a time problem.
Okay.
Yeah, that's their biggest issue. I think where Americans have an advantage is we can get something done in 4 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, even depending on the complexity. You're looking at sometimes, you know, a month or two just to get the mold shipped from China or the Pacific Rim to here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go through customs, loaded on a ship. I mean, it's you can imagine the logistics of that.
Yeah.
Especially a heavy mold, you know, something that weighs 10 or 12,000 pounds. I mean, that's a big deal. So that's the good news. If somebody needs something in a hurry, they got to use us in the States, because they're not going to get it done that fast. And even if the Chinese build it or the Pacific Rim builds it fast, the shipping is going to slow it down. There's just no way around that. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your questions. They were all very good.
All right. Hopefully I didn't sound too, I don't want to say stupid, but you know.
You asked for somebody that's not involved in the trade. You did your homework and you asked very intelligent questions. So
Okay.
I would give you a B+. I was going to give you an A, but then I realized you're at Ohio State. I just couldn't do it.
Right. Exactly. I can't change that one. So. Maybe when you visit campus someday and go to a game, you know, my B+ might switch to an A or an A- because you understand where I'm coming from.
I understand where you're coming from. I'm going to give you an A anyways, because I'm a softie. All right.
Me too.
Well, it was a pleasure chatting with you. If you ever had any more questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Email's the best way, and we can continue on. Okay?
That's good. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
So that's it from here. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have a story to tell, just contact me. Go to the toolanddieguy.com. There's a contact button right there. Email me. My only request is, you know, it's 2020. I hope you have a webcam. I prefer to do the video interviews so people can see you and get a feel for who you are. Do you have something on your mind? Do you want to ask me a question? Do you want to talk about your time in the trade? You know, one of the reasons I started the toolanddieguy.com was to share my experience in the trade. You might not want to record 300 videos like I did, but you might have a story to tell, and I'll bet you it's a good one. So again, please contact me. I'm Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy, keeping the trade alive through stories like this, and we'll see you on the next video.